At 2:07 in the morning, my phone shattered the silence beside my bed. I almost ignored it. Only one person ever called instead of texting. Elise? She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded thin, like she'd been crying for hours and had finally run out of tears. Nolan, can you come help me pack? I sat up. What happened? I'll explain later. You sound terrified. I know. Another pause. Please don't make me explain over the phone. I looked at the clock. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. 25 minutes later, I was parking outside her apartment building with an overnight bag, 2 empty storage boxes, and more questions than I could organize. If you've ever answered a call because someone mattered more than your sleep, subscribe before we go any further. Like this story if you've ever trusted someone without asking enough questions. And tell me in the comments, I need to know what happened. Because if someone you loved locked the door behind you at 2 in the morning and begged you to stay, would you leave? The hallway outside Elise's apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and old carpet shampoo. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. She wore jeans, an oversized gray sweatshirt, and no makeup. Her hair had been pulled into a hurried knot that had mostly fallen apart. Cardboard boxes covered the living room floor, but almost nothing had been packed. It looked less like someone preparing to move than someone preparing to disappear. You came. She tried to smile. It never reached her eyes. I said I would. I stepped inside carrying the first box. Before I could ask another question, she quietly shut the apartment door. Then she locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. The soft metallic clicks echoed through the apartment. She rested one hand against the door without looking at me. Stay. Only one word. Not dramatic, not loud, almost whispered. I frowned. I wasn't planning to leave. She finally looked up. No. Her breathing slowed, as if forcing herself to remain calm. I mean, whatever happens tonight, don't leave me here alone. Something inside me tightened. For 12 years, Elise had been the strongest person I knew. She had sat beside me when my father died. She had driven 4 hours after my divorce just to leave groceries outside my apartment because she knew I hated people seeing me fall apart. She wasn't someone who asked for rescue. She was someone who rescued everyone else. Seeing fear on her face unsettled me more than anything she could have said. I placed the box on the floor. Talk to me. Instead of answering, she walked into the kitchen. The kettle was already boiling. An untouched mug sat beside another that still held cold coffee. Neither looked recent. She poured hot water into a chipped blue mug, but didn't drink it. I've been trying to decide who I could trust. You picked me. I almost didn't. That hurt more than I expected. She noticed. I don't mean because of you. She stared at the steam rising from the cup. I mean because once I tell someone, none of this can go back. Silence stretched between us. I noticed things I hadn't before. Every family photograph had been removed from the walls. Only pale rectangles remained where sunlight hadn't faded the paint. A small brass key rested beside the sink. It looked old, far older than the apartment. I pointed toward it. Moving storage? She quickly covered it with her hand. No. Too quickly. She slid it into her sweatshirt pocket. My questions multiplied. Instead of answering them, she handed me packing tape. Books first. We worked in silence. It felt strangely familiar.
When we'd been teenagers, we'd spent entire afternoons organizing books at the tiny public library where her mother volunteered. Back then, silence had meant comfort. Tonight, it meant avoidance.
As I packed paperbacks into a box, something slipped free. A photograph. Old. The edges had yellowed. 3 children stood beside a lake. One was clearly Elise. The second was me. The third, I couldn't remember ever meeting him. What is this? She crossed the room so quickly she nearly knocked over a lamp. She took the picture from my hand. You weren't supposed to see that. I was in it. I know. Who's the other kid? She stared at the photograph for several seconds. I'll explain. When? Soon. Her answer wasn't really an answer. A heavy knock interrupted us. 3 slow knocks, not impatient, certain. Neither of us moved. Another 3 knocks. Elise's face emptied of color. They found me. My stomach dropped. Who? She didn't answer. The knocking stopped. Instead, a phone vibrated somewhere inside the apartment. Not mine, not hers. We both turned toward the bedroom. The vibration continued, slow, persistent. Neither of us had heard another person enter. Neither of us remembered leaving a second phone in there. Elise whispered so quietly I almost missed it. I threw that away yesterday. Neither of us spoke. The vibration continued for another few seconds, before stopping as abruptly as it had begun. The apartment fell so silent that I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Elise didn't move. Her shoulders had stiffened, and her eyes remained fixed on the hallway leading to the bedroom. You said you threw it away, I said quietly. I did. Then whose phone is that? She swallowed. I don't know. It wasn't convincing. Not because she was lying, but because she sounded like someone trying to convince herself. I took one cautious step toward the hallway. Her hand caught my wrist. No. What if someone's in there? I've checked every room. You checked before I arrived. I checked again after you came. There was something strangely specific about the way she answered. Not defensive, just exhausted. As long as I've been here tonight, she said, no one has walked through that door. I looked toward the front entrance. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain hung exactly where she'd left it. Nothing about the apartment suggested anyone else was inside. And yet, the phone had vibrated. I gently pulled my wrist free. If it's nothing, we'll know in 30 seconds. She closed her eyes. I wish I believed that. I walked down the hallway. The bedroom door stood half open. Everything inside looked strangely untouched. The bed was neatly made. Suitcases rested open on top of the comforter. Most of the dresser drawers had already been emptied. A framed mirror leaned against the wall instead of hanging where it belonged. Then I heard it. Another vibration, closer this time. I followed the sound to the closet. Inside, beneath a folded blanket, lay a black smartphone. Its screen glowed. Unknown number. One new voicemail. No missed call, just a voicemail. I stared at it. It was right here, I called. I told you! Elise hadn't followed me. She remained standing in the hallway, as though crossing into the bedroom required more courage than she had left. I picked up the phone. It felt cold, older than either of ours. The lock screen displayed no wallpaper, only the notification. One voicemail, received 1 minute ago. I looked back at Elise. Do you know the passcode?
I've never seen that phone. Then why did you say you threw it away? She looked down. Because, she struggled to finish. The last phone that appeared in my apartment looked exactly like that one. A chill ran through me. What do you mean, last phone? It happened 3 weeks ago. She finally stepped into the bedroom. I found one on my kitchen table. You called the police? I should have. You didn't? I convinced myself someone had left it by mistake. She rubbed her forehead.
Then it started ringing every night. What happened? I smashed it.
And?
I dropped the pieces into a dumpster across town. She looked directly at the phone in my hand.
So tell me how it's here again. Neither of us had an answer. I pressed the power button. The screen asked for Face ID. It didn't recognize me. Then, unexpectedly, it unlocked. Not because of me, because it had no security enabled at all. The voicemail icon blinked. Elise took a step backward. Don't. I'm listening. You don't have to. I think I do. I pressed play. Static filled the room. For nearly 10 seconds, there was nothing else. Then a woman's voice emerged. Soft, older, calm. If you're hearing this, you're already too late. The recording crackled. I tried to protect both of you. Another burst of static. They'll tell you it began with money. A pause. It didn't. It began with a promise. The message ended, only 22 seconds long. No name, no explanation, nothing else. I replayed it. The voice sounded strangely familiar. Not familiar enough to identify, just enough to make me feel I'd heard it years ago. Elise leaned against the bedroom wall. I've heard that message before. You have? 3 times. You never told me. I never told anyone. She looked ashamed. I thought people would think I was losing my mind. I wanted to tell her this could all be explained. Someone was harassing her. Someone wanted to scare her. There had to be a logical reason. But logic felt smaller than the room we were standing in. Because the message hadn't threatened us. It hadn't demanded anything. It had simply assumed we already belonged together. Both of you, not just Elise. Me too. The realization settled between us. I lowered the phone. Why would whoever left this include me? I don't know. But they expected me to be here. She nodded once. That's what frightens me.
We returned to the living room. Neither of us felt like packing anymore. The cardboard boxes remained open, half filled with books and dishes. Outside, rain streaked down the windows. I noticed something I hadn't earlier. A stack of unopened envelopes sat neatly beneath the lamp. Every envelope had been addressed to Elise. None had been opened. I picked one up. No return address, only her name. The postmark was from different cities. Chicago, Cleveland, Nashville, Denver, months apart. These all came recently? She nodded. I stopped opening them. Why? Because they're empty. I frowned. Empty? I thought it was a mistake. She handed me the oldest envelope. I carefully opened it. Nothing fell out. Completely blank. Except, tucked inside one corner was a tiny brass key, almost identical to the one I'd seen beside the kitchen sink. I looked at her. How many keys do you have? She hesitated.
6? Where did they come from? One in every envelope. And you've never told anyone? I didn't know what they unlocked. She reached into her sweatshirt pocket and placed the key she'd hidden earlier beside the new one. The metal had aged differently. Different years, different wear. Yet they clearly belonged to the same collection. 6 matching keys. No explanation, no note, no instructions, just keys. My teacher's instincts took over. Someone wasn't trying to frighten Elise. Someone was leaving pieces of something, waiting until the collection was complete. Before I could say that aloud, headlights swept across the apartment ceiling. A car had stopped outside. Elise slowly pulled back the curtain. A gray sedan sat across the street with its headlights still on. The driver never got out, never honked, never looked toward the building. The engine simply idled. Then, after nearly a full minute, the driver's side window rolled down. An elderly woman leaned out just enough for us to see her face.
She looked directly at our apartment, raised one finger toward the window, not pointing at us, pointing at the brass keys lying on the table behind us. Then she quietly drove away. Neither of us had ever seen her before. I stood frozen at the window long after the gray sedan disappeared. "Did you recognize her?" I asked. Elise slowly shook her head. "No." But she knew about the keys. "I know." The apartment felt smaller now, as if every unanswered question had quietly occupied another corner of the room. I locked the curtain back into place. For the first time that night, I wondered whether staying had been the right decision. Not because I wanted to leave, because whoever had been arranging all of this had expected me to stay. That realization settled into my chest like a stone. Neither of us could pretend packing mattered anymore. We spread the 6 brass keys across the coffee table. Each looked nearly identical, but under the kitchen light the differences became obvious. One had a tiny scratch near the bow, another was slightly darker. The oldest carried a worn engraving so faint it was almost invisible. I fetched my reading glasses from my backpack. "What are you looking for?" Elise asked. "Anything." Turning the oldest key toward the light, I noticed a tiny stamp, R3. The next key read R5. Another carried R8. None of them were consecutive. Someone hadn't mailed random keys. They were part of a larger collection. "There are missing numbers," I murmured. Elise leaned closer. "So there are more. Or there used to be." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Why send only 6? I don't think they wanted all of them to reach you." Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Arthur Rowan, her father. I glanced at Elise. "He never calls me." She looked almost as surprised as I felt. "Answer." I did. "Nolan?" Arthur's voice remained calm, almost unnaturally calm. "Is Elise with you?" "Yes." A pause. "Good." Not relief, confirmation. "I've been trying to reach her. Her phone's been off." "I know." He lowered his voice. "Listen carefully." My pulse quickened. "If she's packing..." He stopped. "Tell her she cannot take the blue suitcase." I stared toward the bedroom. The blue suitcase sat exactly where we'd left it. "Why?" Another pause. "I'll explain tomorrow." "No." My own voice sounded firmer than I expected. "You explain now." Arthur sighed. "I can't." "Is someone threatening her?"
I'm trying to keep her alive. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Elise had already read the answer on my face. He mentioned the suitcase. I nodded. She closed her eyes. He always hated that suitcase. Hated it. It belonged to my grandmother. She walked into the bedroom. The blue suitcase looked older than everything else in the room. Scuffed leather, faded stitching, a luggage tag so worn that only the first letter remained. She rested her hand on it without opening it. My grandmother died before I was born. So why would your father care whether you packed it? I've asked him before. And? He always changed the subject. I knelt beside the suitcase. The zipper was locked with a tiny brass padlock. Not unusual, except the keyhole looked almost identical to the brass keys lying on the coffee table. I reached into my pocket. The oldest key slid inside perfectly. Neither of us moved. You sure? Elise whispered. No. I turned it gently. The lock clicked open. Neither of us breathed. Inside, no clothes, no jewelry, no family keepsakes. Only carefully folded newspaper, layer after layer. Someone had deliberately filled the suitcase so it would appear heavy. As we removed the final sheet, a flat wooden box emerged. Dark walnut, no markings, no handle, only 6 tiny keyholes arranged in a circle across the lid. We stared at it in silence. 6. Exactly 6. Elise whispered, The keys. They belong here. But why mail them separately? I didn't answer, because another question had become much larger. Who had hidden this box inside a suitcase no one was supposed to open?
We carried the wooden box into the living room. Neither of us rushed to unlock it. Sometimes waiting feels safer than knowing. I examined the craftsmanship. Old, handmade. The wood had darkened with age. One corner carried a water stain. Someone had kept this box for decades. Elise sat beside me without speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. When we were kids, I looked up. Did you ever visit my grandmother's house? I don't think so. You hesitated. I honestly don't remember. She studied my face. There are pieces of my childhood that don't fit anymore. I know the feeling. My father says memory protects us. What do you think? I think memory obeys whoever survives. The sentence lingered between us. I picked up the first key. One by one, we inserted all 6 into the matching locks. None would turn alone. Only after the 6th key clicked into place did I try again. This time, every lock rotated together. A soft mechanical sound echoed inside the box. Then, nothing. It didn't open. I pressed gently on the lid. Still nothing. Until I noticed something tucked underneath. A folded envelope. Hidden beneath the base rather than inside. Someone had expected us to look too quickly. Across the front, written in neat blue ink, were only 4 words. Open together, never alone. My throat tightened. Someone had known there would be 2 people here. Not Elise, not me. Both of us. Again. I carefully unfolded the note. Before I could read the first sentence, a key scraped inside the apartment's front door. Neither of us had touched the lock. Elise's eyes widened. The deadbolt. Slowly, deliberately,
the doorknob began to turn from the outside. The doorknob turned once, then stopped. Neither of us breathed. Every instinct told me to move, but my feet stayed planted beside the wooden box. Elise reached for my arm without taking her eyes off the front door. A soft knock followed. Not demanding.
Patient. 3 slow taps, the same rhythm we'd heard earlier. Then an elderly woman's voice drifted through the door. Nolan? Elise? If you've opened the suitcase, it's finally time. My heart skipped. She knew our names. Elise looked at me. I've never heard that voice before. I walked toward the door slowly. Who are you? There was a pause. My name is Vera Holloway. The name meant nothing to either of us. And I'm the reason your parents spent 25 years pretending the past never happened. I unlocked the deadbolt, but left the chain in place. Standing outside was the same woman from the gray sedan. She looked tired rather than threatening. Rain had soaked the shoulders of her coat. In one hand she held an old leather folder. In the other, a 7th brass key. I think, she said quietly, you've been waiting long enough. 10 minutes later, Vera sat across from us at the coffee table. No one spoke until she carefully placed the 7th key beside the other 6. I never intended to frighten you, she said. I intended to make sure neither of you discovered the truth alone. I looked at the note beneath the wooden box. Open together, never alone. You wrote that? She nodded. I promised someone I would. She picked up the 7th key and inserted it into a nearly invisible slot hidden underneath the box. Neither Elise nor I had noticed it. The mechanism clicked. The lid lifted by itself. Inside wasn't money. There were no jewels, no deeds. Only a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a photograph, and a cassette tape. The photograph stole my attention first. It showed 3 adults standing beside 2 children at a lakeside picnic. One child was unmistakably me. The other was Elise. We couldn't have been older than 7. I stared at it. I don't remember this. You weren't supposed to, Vera replied. The adults made sure of that. She unfolded the oldest letter. It began 26 years ago. Not with an inheritance, not with hidden wealth, with a car accident. 2 families had been traveling home from the same community fundraiser. One driver crossed the center line. 2 people died. Several children survived, including us. I frowned. My parents died years later. They did. But after the accident, your mother and Elise's grandmother became inseparable. Vera slid another letter toward us. They discovered that the trucking company responsible had falsified maintenance records. They wanted to sue. They wanted the truth. But someone powerful prevented it. The company settled quietly. Witnesses changed their stories. Evidence disappeared. The families accepted confidential settlements on one condition: silence. Arthur knew. Diane knew. My parents knew. Everyone agreed never to reopen the case, except Elise's grandmother. Before she died, she gathered every document she had managed to save. She hid them inside the wooden box. Then she made Vera promise something. If anything ever happened to Arthur, or if Elise tried to disappear, find Nolan. I looked up sharply. Why me? Vera smiled sadly. Because your mother made the second promise. She handed me one final letter. The handwriting wasn't familiar until I reached the signature. Love always, Mom. My hands began to shake. The letter wasn't about lawsuits. It wasn't about money. It was about me. She wrote that after the accident, I blamed myself for encouraging another child to switch seats in the car before they left the fundraiser. That child survived. Another did not. I had been 7 years old. The guilt became so overwhelming that a child psychologist recommended shielding me from every detail of the accident. Over time, the memories faded. Not naturally. They were never discussed again. My mother believed forgetting would save me. Instead, it left holes in my life I never understood. I looked at Elise. Tears silently ran down her face. My grandmother always told me I had someone I should never lose, she whispered. I thought she meant a husband someday. Vera gently shook her head. No. She meant your oldest friend. A knock interrupted the silence. This one was different, firm, measured. When I opened the door, a man in his 30s stood there, holding a weathered document case. I'm Caleb Foster. He looked first at Vera, then at us. I believe you're ready. He spread several certified court records across the dining table. Everything Vera had told us was documented. The settlements, the missing evidence, the correspondence between attorneys. Arthur had spent decades trying to protect Elise from becoming obsessed with a case that could never be retried. Not because he wanted to hide the truth, because he had watched grief consume everyone who refused to let it rest. The anonymous envelopes? I asked. Caleb nodded. Vera mailed them. The phones? He looked embarrassed. Those were mine. Both Elise and I stared at him. I couldn't convince Vera to contact you directly. She insisted you'd ignore a stranger. So you scared us? I was trying to make sure you didn't leave before finding the box. Vera sighed. It was a mistake. I know. For the first time all night, someone admitted they had handled things badly. No villains, just frightened people making poor decisions for reasons they believed were loving. Dawn slowly brightened the apartment. The rain had stopped. Elise stood in the bedroom beside the blue suitcase. I don't think I'm running away anymore. I smiled. I don't think you have to. She looked around the apartment one last time. So, will you help me pack? This time, her voice was steady. I laughed quietly. That was the original plan. For the next hour, we packed ordinary things. Books, coffee mugs, folded blankets, photographs that no longer felt frightening. The apartment gradually emptied, not because we were escaping, because we were finally moving forward. Before leaving, Elise picked up the mysterious phone. Its battery had died sometime before sunrise. It never rang again. She placed it inside an empty drawer and quietly closed it. Some questions had answers. Some never would. And somehow, I was finally at peace with that. Arthur was waiting outside when we carried the last box downstairs. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then he stepped toward me. I owed you the truth years ago. You thought you were protecting us. He nodded. I was. And maybe... I glanced toward Elise loading another box into my truck. Maybe you were also protecting yourself. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't deny it. He simply helped lift the final suitcase. No speeches. No dramatic apologies.
just an old man accepting the weight he had carried for too long.
As the sun rose over the quiet street, Elise climbed into the passenger seat.
Before I started the engine, she reached into her pocket. One brass key remained. The 7th. What will you do with it? She looked out the window. I'll keep it. As a reminder? She smiled faintly. As proof. Of what? That the people who love us don't always tell the truth. She paused. But sometimes they lie because they're terrified of losing us. I looked at the empty apartment one last time. The windows reflected only the pale morning light. No mysterious silhouettes, no waiting cars, no ringing phones. Just silence, the kind that no longer felt like fear. As we drove away, I realized the call at 2 a.m. had never really been about helping Elise pack. It was about helping both of us unpack the part of our lives that had been locked away for 26 years. And sometimes the hardest door to open is the one someone closed out of love.